So, welcome everyone. Welcome to the next chapter in computer software, moving parts past market saturation. I am Enrique Guzman-Barron from Boost AIBiz. I am excited to have John Reuben with us today for a very timely discussion. John is the managing director at Continuous Software for the Americas and an early pioneer in project portfolio management. Over his career spanning more than 2 decades, he has helped organizations bridge the gap between strategy and execution. In fact, Continuous Software is leading the launch of Aangine here in the USA. That's an AI-driven strategic portfolio planning platform that blends algorithmic modeling and AI to help business simulate change and optimize their project portfolios in real time. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. Now, John, thank you for joining us. In our preparation chat, you share a fascinating insights that I want to start with. You mentioned how projects leader can have all the right people skills and process, but you don't have information. Executives cannot act on it. So you are just another employee, not a strategic partner. Could you explain what you mean by that? How has that perspective shaped the way you lead teams and projects?
Yeah, I think, obviously people skills are really important in any human interaction, and it's really a requisite skill for any PMO or project leader. And obviously process is important too. People, you need to be rigorous about your adherence to your agile and your waterfall processes. But projects have become very complex. They're big, there's lots of them, there's a lot of constraints, there's a lot of dependencies, and you need to understand the math involved. And you need to be able to give reasonable choices to your executives when you're interacting with them. It's not enough to express them well or express them in the context of the right process. It's more important, I think, than anything to give them options that are doable and also options where they understand the ramifications from a strategic, financial, and operational perspective so that those executives can make a good decision. And I think that's what makes you a trusted advisor for those executives, not the other two. You need the other two to express it well, but without that last one, without that math, like the Suez Canal closes down, the executive wants to know, what are the ramifications on it, on me? What do I need to, of the options that you're presenting? What does it mean for me financially? All those options that I talked about. So, yeah, and as someone that really was one of the people that pioneered PPM as a discipline, I really think it's missing right now. So that's why we developed the platform that we did.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I have seen on your LinkedIn profile, your headline mentions PPM, people, process, and math, and which I love. And that you just mentioned. Can you talk about that formula and how it factors into the way companies should be planning their strategic portfolio, especially in a saturated software market?
I think that it comes down to what I was saying before, that, there's a lot of good people skills out there. There's a lot of good process, and there's a boatload of math. And the problem is that the math is sort of like that, that pond where you can't see the bottom of the water. You know there's water there, but you don't know whether there's any fish in there. It's not like the clear blue ocean where you can see down to the bottom. You really don't know. And that's because of all that math, because of all this constraint and those dependencies. And without understanding them and understanding how they all calculate, you're really just trying to snorkel in a very, very cloudy water. You're not going to see many fish. If you're looking for something, you're not going to find it. And what what the sea level is looking for is, what are my solutions and how can I get out of this bind? Donald Trump decides to add another tariff. No opinion whether the tariff's correct or not, but there's going to be an impact, and the sea level needs to know that. The head of the transformation needs to know that. I read an article this morning about transformation in Canadian banks, which is going really poorly apparently. And a lot of that is just because there's not a good alignment between the people that are managing these processes and the sea level, because the sea level just doesn't have the visibility. They don't know what's achievable. They don't know what's dangerous. They just sort of like going at it. And the combination of the complexity and the rapid advent of change, it's just too much. And I think that, we felt as a company, having done over 100 PPM installations, that we needed to do something about that because our clients were suffering. They had
Mhm.
PPM, it was doing really well, or they were using Project, or they were even using Excel. They had control tactically over what was going on, but they didn't understand the interrelationships. They didn't know what was possible. So that's where the math comes in. I came up with people process math because PPM, right? Actually, it should be NPP. It should be math, process, and people. Because
Right.
in the end, the CEO gets paid on the math,
Mhm.
profitability. That's what the CEO gets paid on. The numbers are most important. Even if you approach that C-level and you don't talk perfectly and you don't speak in agile terminology, if you're giving him options that are going to do the job for him and he's going to
Mhm.
get his bonus at the end of the year, he really doesn't care,
It's true.
right? So it really should be math first because that's the one immutable factor in all this. The rest of it's very gray. And I
Right.
think that a lot of project leaders, I see it a lot on LinkedIn, are coming around to that, and they're calling me and they're saying, hey, we need to talk more about this because the people that I'm helping to get jobs, to get promoted, they're not getting jobs. They're not getting promoted because they're not delivering really relevant information that the C-level needs. So the C-level doesn't promote them. They're not a trusted advisor.
Right, right, right. And you have been in the software and PPM space so many years, and you have seen wave of tools come and go. In your view, why are so many companies looking for new solutions, even when the market seems saturated with project management tools? It's like you
Yeah,
wrote in
that's a
one of
great
your
question.
articles. If these tools are so mature, why is everyone is switching? And what do you think the next chapter for
Well,
enterprise software looks like beyond this saturation point?
it's a really good question because I was involved in writing the first PPM solution and everybody thought it was a stupid idea. And now I go to PMI and I see that there's just like a plethora of PPM solutions. So I went out to AI and I said, how many PPM solutions are there out there? There's like over 150 of them. And you're right, people are moving from one to the other. I know one major insurance company that's going through three of them in the last 5 years. You know why? I think it's because they get all the data in, they spend all the money, and then the CEO asks a question and they can't answer it. I know of a major university that has spent millions on a very good PPM product. I'm not going to mention the name of the product. And you know what they do? They use it just like as a filing cabinet. And when they need to do planning, they export it to Excel. And it takes them 2 days to find out what a change takes.
Wow. Wow. That's
So I think that's a very clear indicator that what we're doing here is the right thing. Now, time will tell whether we're doing it the right way, but we've tried to do it very mathematically and then put AI on top of it. So rather than using AI to sort of just be subjective, which it is, anyone that's
Mhm.
used AI, you're always correcting it because it's making stuff up, just
Right.
like people do. So it's not a problem. But the thing is that you can't make stuff up when you're dealing with math. So what we
Mhm.
did is when we built our algorithms, it took us about 8 years, and it took us about a year to write the AI. And the reason it was so much quicker is because we're only basing the AI on the math that we generate, so that
Mhm.
we know that when we make a choice for people with the AI, it's based on the math. It's not based on subjective, and it's very bounded. Our developers bounded it so that it can't go out of that, even to the point where the CEO does tell me whether this scenario is profitable, or tell me if this scenario it's going to get done on time. If the
Mm.
CFO the next day looks at the same one, it doesn't take into account anything the CEO did because it's got to be pure. It's got to be clean. That's where I think, that's what really got me going with the math is that I started getting almost angry about it because I saw all these people advertising AI that was just going to save the world. And
Mhm.
it's not. I mean, I myself find that every time I write something with AI, it adds in like something I don't really want it to add. It's got to read it. So imagine that doing that with numbers, with multi-million-dollar projects, what kind of havoc can be wreaked on these
My
poor
God.
companies. It's like crazy.
It is.
So, so I literally came out of retirement to take this job, and the more that I'm doing it, the more enthused I'm becoming because I'm realizing that we can really make a difference.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
really necessarily have to be working. I've worked my full, gambit. But when the guy came to me, the guy that started the company, who's a genius, came to me and said, I want you to come and do this. It was really intriguing to me. It was really intriguing to me that no one had done it before. Because, PPM's been out there since we started writing it in 1999.
Right.
It's been out there for a long time. And they never did this. They never figured out the planning.
True. And talking about that, I mean, I know a continuous software platform is called Aangine that came in a conversation, and I understand the AI is all about providing that safe place to plan, like what you just described, blending algorithm foresight with real-time scenario planning. What was the breakthrough moment in developing AI, and how does it help
I can't
companies
say
more?
what it was because they had already written it and they had quite a few users using it in Europe. When they hired me, they had someone on their staff that had worked for me like 25 years ago when we started the PPM, and the owner of the company wanted to penetrate this territory, this hemisphere. And the guy said, you have to call John. John's done this already. So let John do it. So I got the call, and they already had like banks, insurance companies, credit bureaus using it with hundreds and hundreds of projects. So it's not like what we did with PPM where we started out with, it's a new concept, but the last time I was there for the building of it, the selling of the first few, it's a little different for me. So I can't say what. I think the breakthrough, though, was that they had done so many PPM installations and they kept getting asked for the same.
Okay.
And, so they wrote it.
And building on that, where do you see growth or innovation is happening next? I mean, are there signals or trends you are watching that indicate a new direction for the industry? Like, do you believe executives will be demanding more predictive analytics and scenario modeling?
I think that what has to happen is that there needs to be a greater intersection, a sort of conjoinment between the executives and the people that are executing, particularly on these transformations, because I see that, if I look at LinkedIn, I look at the transformations, the ERP transformations, even the SAP guys, they're all talking about failures. They're talking about lateness, and people are losing their jobs over it. And I think that there's got to be something to bring them together. We're hoping that our tool is a part of that. But in general, the executives have to have more trust in the people that are managing these programs. And the program leaders have to recognize that in order to get that trust, they have to come up with credible solutions, not just ones that sound good or apply to a process, but ones that really meet, are doable.
Right.
Right now there's a lot of distrust, I think. There's a lot of distrust by the people looking up, and the people looking down, it's the same thing. It's just that the people looking down don't talk about it because they don't have time to. It's not their thing. So they're not talking about it on LinkedIn. But if you talk to them directly, I just got an email over LinkedIn from a guy that bought PPM from me 20 years ago, spent $6 million with me, and he was one of the first PPM users at the Hartford Insurance Company. He's retired now. And he wrote to me, and he says, I can see you're still at it. He says, I can't believe they haven't done the math part yet. You know what I mean? Because he put in all the PPM, and at one point he came to me and he said, so how do I know now if a big change occurs? What do I do about it? I've got hundreds of projects. And I was like, well, we're going to write that. But then we sold the company and everybody went there. And, now 20 years later, it still hadn't been done. This guy, this guy from Continuous Software, his name is Levin Olzol, genius. He spent 8 years and a lot of his own money to write this. He literally had PhDs sitting there because it's not like stuff you can just generate out of AI. It's algorithmic research is what it is. It's very complex.
And I understand continuous software has been expanding from a strong base in Europe into the North America, and selling could be different in USA. But what has been your biggest challenge in breaking into the North American market, especially given that it's competitive and saturated? And how are you tackling that?
Well, I think anytime you break into a new geography, it's always very difficult. It always takes, months and sometimes even years. I think our biggest challenge is that although we are part of the PPM ecosystem, we are a new feature, we are a new concept, we are sort of breaking. We're not competing against the big PPM players, but we're telling people they're not doing everything that you really need. You need something else. So in a way, we are competing with them. The other thing
Okay.
is that we're using a almost really exclusively a partner model. So
Mhm.
you have to working with partners is, I think, a little bit more difficult because you have to train them and you have to sell them, and they're the toughest people to sell because they've been selling all this PPM stuff, so they know. And we've been fortunate; we have several very good resellers already that we're
Wow.
working with. But I just think that if you read the stuff that I write, and then you read the stuff that you're getting out of Broadcom or PlanView or Microsoft, it kind of sounds the same because they're
Mhm.
saying that they do all that stuff. And in some respects, they do. I mean, they all have a good planning component, but it's not algorithmic. You know what I mean? It's not like what we do. And that's not to say that everybody needs our stuff. We work with partners where we tell them all the time, a lot of your customers do not need what we have. They're not complex enough. You're moving
Mhm.
stuff around and your dashboards are fine for them. They should stay with that. Let's not bang our head against the wall with this. But for a
Mm.
complex environment, you know, so
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of the difficulty. But then it's always a challenge. I've been doing this for 30 years and I've done everything from APM to ITSM to configuration management.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
just a process that you have to take and you have to just keep hammering your head against it. But I really believe in this and it's something I understand extremely well. So it's been a little easier
And
than other
looking
ones
ahead,
I've done.
right, and looking ahead to the next quarter, let's say Q, what are the key metrics or signals you will be tracking
POCs.
to know that you're
Proof
on
of
target?
concepts, proof of concepts, and then sales, towards the end of the year. I mean, we're
Mhm.
coming into our second year. We've built a good pipeline of partners. We've got a good pipeline of prospects, got a few POCs going. How do those POCs, how many of those POCs result in deals? Not just because we want the revenue, but also because we want to understand what our metrics are. If we do
Mhm.
5 POCs, how many deals are we going to get? Because then we know how many POCs we can get. Eventually it's math, just like with the
Mhm.
PPF.
True. True.
It's math, right? But you have to figure out those metrics. They're lucky they've got their metrics already. I don't know what my metrics are. I haven't done enough POCs to say, well, I've done 10 POCs and I got 3. Now I know I need 30 POCs. I don't know
Like
that.
like the sun
It
rule
all
of
comes
one, two,
down to
three.
math in most business situations. It's funny because I'm a history major, so I'm really not a mathematician at all. I'm really bad
Mhm.
with math. And I find myself promoting math like at every specter of my professional life. But it really is, it drives everything. You've got to understand it. So yeah, I would say that part of it too is like, the maturity of our partners. How many of them are trained? Are they
Mhm.
trained from a sales perspective? Are they trained from an implementation perspective? How many accounts have they brought us into? What's their level of engagement? Like today I have
Okay.
a lunch and learn with one of our partners, and they've gone from their salespeople working with us and bringing us a lot of leads, and their executives being really on board. Now we're doing a lunch and learn for all 50 people. That means we're making progress
Progress.
because
Right.
they've decided that it's worth it. And I'm really happy about it because they're one of the premier PPM resellers. In the country.
Mhm.
So the fact that they're going to trust their entire group with me for an hour means a lot.
Lot.
But that's
Definitely.
a soft metric. In the end, it comes down to
Money.
how many calls result in a POC, how many POCs result in a sale. You've been in sales, right? You understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's mathematical. You know,
Yeah. It is. It is. It is a
it all
whole.
starts with the marketing and the posting and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
in the end, what does it mean?
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So, before we wrap up on this air
Hmm.
portion, I'd love to hear about real world example. If there is a recent success story where you help a client organization cut through the noise of saturated markets, perhaps a case where using AI engine or your approach enabled an executive team to see the real
Yeah.
impact of a change before it was too late and make a better decision as a result.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a client. Well, we have a couple of clients over in Europe that are a really good example. We have one that's a telecommunications company, actually T-Mobile, in one of the countries in Europe. And what they were faced with is they had 200 projects running in Jira. And
Mm-hmm.
they would try to get together for a planning session because the executive would come in and say, I need something done. And it would literally take them 2 weeks to make the decision, which really didn't please the executives much. The executives started saying, every time we have a meeting, it's to set another meeting. Why do I, why am I dealing with this? So we brought Aangine in and we connected all of those 200 into our products. We didn't even use a project management. We just brought it directly in from Jira, and they
Mm-hmm.
went from 2-week meetings to like half an hour meeting, and they
Wow.
had decisions made. So
Nice.
obviously they love it. We have a bank, we have a credit bureau in Turkey where it was sort of the same thing. They had PPM fully implemented. I don't remember which one it was, and I wouldn't want to say because it's not fair to them. And these are all companies that are willing to let us publicize their names. So I'm using their names. We have a company called KDD Credits, the credit union for the entire country of Turkey. And if people don't
Wow.
know about Turkey, Turkey's the biggest country in Europe. It's a big, big country. There's a lot of stuff going on in Turkey. And they're using our stuff on top of a PPM solution. And it was the same thing. They just weren't able to make decisions, weren't able to, I can't point out like a specific crisis that occurred for them. Although
Mm-hmm.
maybe I should have read, if I'd known that this was one of your questions, I would have read my user case studies more closely. They rave on it about it.
Mm-hmm.
They've let us publish it. Their credit bureau, and they've let us, it's like having Experian let you talk about their user. They would never do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Aangine has really helped them because they have hundreds of projects and they're all interrelated. And something comes up and stuff comes up in Turkey,
Mm-hmm.
problems and money devaluation, and they're able to react now.
That's amazing. That
Insurance
is
companies,
amazing.
the same thing. So it's just the ability to react and understand the ramifications. It's a very simple concept, but you got to write a lot of algorithms to do it if you're doing a really complex. And so we're very proud of that. We're proud of the fact that most of our customers will let us use their names,
Mm-hmm.
which is very
Mm-hmm.
unusual.
It
As
is.
you may know, normally it's like sort of like, yeah, you can write a case study about us, but don't use our names and don't,
All right. No, that's
yeah,
true. That's so true.
yeah.
All right.
So yeah, we're happy about that.
Well, thank you, John. I mean, this was really incredible, insightful. I really appreciate your openness and the real example you share. I think so. These insights will resonate with a lot of listeners who are figuring out how to navigate the next chapter on enterprise software. This has been for everyone. This has been the next chapter in computer software, moving past market saturation. Stay tuned for the next one. But
Thank you.
John, thank you so much again. I
Have a
appreciate
good
it.
one. See you later.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.